welcome to the Stuck Mic AvCast. My name is Carl Valeri, and I'm your host today. And today we're going to talk about non-towered airport operations. Just a quick intro, and I say a quick intro in jest because we're going to have a really cool conversation. And joining me today are our co-host, Leslie Cauble. Leslie, welcome, coming from Bentonville, Arkansas.
Yeah, Carl, just made a big move this past month, and we are excited to be here, and I'm ready to start doing some flying in Northwest Arkansas.
Awesome. We're excited to hear about your adventures, that's for sure. And also joining us is James Spearman. James, welcome, and where are you today?
I'm at my house near Knoxville, Tennessee, just outside of, nearby Sevierville. So that's closer to the Air Force Base, so it keeps me close by.
Awesome. Beautiful area, that's for sure, near Pigeon Forge. And another great place that I love to visit is our next co-host. That's Bill English, and he is, I think, in Leesburg. I could tell by his T-shirt.
I'm dressed for the occasion, Leesburg, Virginia, and beautiful here today.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to get started talking about non-towered airport operations. The reason I brought this up is that I do a lot of flying from a towered airport to non-towered airports quite often. And, one of the other night I was flying into a New York airport, and the tower wasn't operating, and I was like talking on the radio, doing everything right. Get on the ground, flare, and then all of a sudden I'm looking outside the side of my eyes. I'm looking around saying, hey, what's going on? Something looks different. Well, the lights started turning off. And, of course, we did the clicks and the 7 clicks and brought them back on to bright. And I said to myself, this would be a good topic for the podcast, because a lot of times we forget how to actually operate within a non-towered airport, especially if you're someone like me who normally starts my day at a towered airport. A lot of interesting things happen in that. We're going to talk about that soon. But let's move on to the Preflight Checklist and talk a little bit about our sponsor. And the sponsor of this show is actually Stratus Financial. And these are the folks that are giving away scholarships, guys. If you're wanting to get a new rating, if you want to move on in your career, you can go to aviationcareerspodcast.com/free and get one of those free scholarships, guys. Using the coupon code Stratus. Stratus Financial is where dreams take flight. They offer loans for pilot training, and they understand your needs because they are pilots. You can find out more at stratus.finance. And, as a sponsor of this podcast, they've given away, I think it's over 150 scholarships guides so far. So again, use that coupon code STRATUS. Whether you're financing your dream of flying or simplifying the process by taking care of your student loans, their efficient, hassle-free funding can connect you to a life of your dreams of becoming a professional pilot sooner than you ever thought possible. Find out more at stratus.finance. Well, let's move on to the cruise flight. Well, as I said, this is really exciting for me to talk about non-towered airport operations, because a lot of people don't realize that in a lot of my flying, especially here I am in Lakeland, I'm usually taking off out of a place that's actually towered, especially now that Lakeland has a 24-hour control tower. And even at my day job, I'm taking off normally from a towered airport, but many times I'm actually landing in a non-towered airport. And there's a lot of challenges there. And some of the challenges in moving into a non-towered airport are the fact that, well, we don't operate there very often if we're used to going from one tower to the next. So today we want to kind of, give you a little bit of a primer as to going into non-towered airports. And I know we get a little bit nervous when we're flying into them. So we're going to start off with a couple of things and then kind of go like a round robin and have everybody kind of chime in as to some of their advice as far as what to say, what not to say, that type of thing. So I'll start us off with what to say and when to say it, and then we'll kind of go around with Leslie coming up next. So as far as what to say and when to say it, of course, you want to self-announce. You're not talking to somebody, unless you're talking to Unicom trying to get the weather, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you really want to announce who you are. Cessna 12345 is 10 miles south, inbound for runway 5 at, where are we? Lakeland. Cessna 12345. So one of the things we want to announce ourselves, who we are, where we are, where we're landing, that type of thing, and tell what traffic it is. So I'm going to, go back and say that again. So it's going to be Lakeland traffic, Cessna 12345, 10 miles south, landing, runway 5, Lakeland traffic. So we're going to actually self-announce where we are, what we're doing, and we're going to start that about 10 miles out. So there's a lot of other things we want to say too. So Leslie, if you could, let's move on to you. What other things should you be saying in the pattern?
Well, Carl, before I talk about what to say as you're coming into a non-towered airport, let's talk about what you want to do first. And you want to use the other sense of listening first. So when you plug in that CTAF frequency, you just want to take a pause and listen first. And, the reason why we do that is to be situationally aware, because there could be other aircraft in the traffic pattern. There could be other aircraft transitioning through that airspace, through the area. You need to find out what sequence you're going to be in for the pattern. Non-towered airports, you will find that, especially the larger aircraft, you will find a lot of them that will come in on a straight-in approach. They don't actually get into a basic rectangular traffic pattern. So you just got to key up and listen, get into frequency and listen first. So announcing yourself in the pattern, like you said, talking about your different positions. So you've got your downwind leg, your base, your final, and the whole time it's eyes outside, is looking for traffic in the area. And then thinking about ahead of time, let's back up to that 10 miles out. You're making that first position report. And then you want to announce maybe not just the runway number that you're going to be landing on and what your intentions are, but how are you going to get into the traffic pattern? So a lot of non-towered airports, you're not going to come in where you can do exactly a 45-degree angle to the downwind leg, but maybe you're coming from the opposite direction. So are you going to overfly the airport at 500 feet, go out several miles, and then descend and then come in on the 45 to downwind leg into the traffic pattern? So, if you are going to make that straight in approach, you definitely need to announce that. The whole reason why we communicate in the traffic pattern or even outside the traffic pattern with that 5-10 mile radius of the airport is because non-towered airports are notorious for mid-air collisions or near mid-air collisions. So that's the number one thing that you want to be cognizant of is other aircraft in the area, and you've got to start that communication with each other.
Absolutely. Great advice. That's interesting what you said about straight in approaches. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are coming in on an instrument approach. So hopefully they'll announce that and say, hey, I'm inbound, from the south or the north and inbound for runway 5 and straight in. I think that's some great advice. Thanks. And speaking of which, James, as far as announcing, what other items should we announce and what should we say?
So, first, I do think it's kind of funny that, when you start your training, you're terrified of towered airports, right? You're normally at a lower traffic airport, and you just become accustomed to that. But then as you grow as a pilot, you become more and more accustomed. As a professional pilot, you grow dealing, filing IFR every single flight. And then all of a sudden now you're terrified to go to to non-towered airports. A lot of my airline friends or guys that I fly with in the guard, will be coming in, the tower's closed, and it's just like, we're visual, it's fine, just announce where you're at. They're just, it's just kind of funny. But I think, in general, I'm at a very busy airport at Gatlinburg. We have a ton of traffic, and I think being, having some situational awareness, when you're 10, 15 miles out, start listening, just like y'all have said, and start building your situational awareness, where people are around. Nowadays, you've got ADSB in, where you can start mapping all these people and start making a plan, several minutes out. This guy should already be landing. This guy sounds like he's going around the pattern. Guy or girl is going around the pattern. He'll probably still be a problem for me. And, announcing what your intentions are and having some common sense probably helps too. You don't line up for the straight in when there's 15 people in the pattern. You're gonna use a standard entry pattern. You're not gonna line up at a 10 mile straight in and wreck everybody else's plans. So those would be my 2 cents.
Yeah. That's good advice, that's for sure. Although we see that happen a lot here, that there is somebody that kind of wrecks everybody pattern, and that's usually the airlines, like you mentioned, coming in on those 20-mile finals to the runway. Good advice. Well, how about Bill? What else did we miss? Anything else you want to add as far as what we should say?
Yeah, a couple things there. We talk a little bit about the IFRs coming in and the pattern entry and everything, and it's important to remember our right of way, right? Our AIM and non-towered advisory circular FA makes it clear that there, IFR versus VFR, that's not how we choose right of way, right? An IFR coming into the pattern does not have the right of way over the people in the pattern and so on. But at the same time, now here we got a jet blasting off here at our now non-towered airport. So on the other hand, when you're there in the pattern, you've got to read the room a little bit too, right? You might be on downwind and here comes a jet, biz jet or whatever on a instrument approach. It doesn't take much to extend your downwind 30 seconds to fall behind him. So one thing that in the more populated areas that we'll find though too, getting away from the right of way, talking about what we should be saying on frequency, and you hinted at it a little bit, Carl, in your example. Be really clear about where you are. It's easy to be on the very few Unicom frequencies that there are. There's only, I don't know, maybe half a dozen of them that are distributed around, maybe a little more than that. Lots of different airports can be using the same frequency in the same area. So make it clear, you're calling up, hey, Shangri-La traffic, that's who you're talking to. I'm talking to the people at Shangri-La Airport. November 123, 45 to downwind. And at the end, landing on runway 36, Shangri-La. That's what I'm doing. I'm landing at Shangri-La Airport. So the people at all the other airports aren't confused. Make that really clear. Another point, there are a lot of non-towered airports out there that don't have a frequency. And there's a lot of airplanes out there that operate at non-towered airports that don't have radios. Where my airplane is just up the road here, we don't have a frequency. We're actually putting in for one. That's a long process with the FAA, but some airports will use multicom 122.9. If you're not familiar with that, that's sort of the generic, if there's nothing else, frequency to use. Try that on a Sunday afternoon with good weather if you want to hear lots of noise and people stepping all over each other, but careful of that too. So there's some places where you go and eyeballs and maybe ADS-B, maybe not, is all you have to look out for those places. And they can be pretty busy, even without an assigned frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about radios. I mean, I used to be part of the Deaf Pilots Association and teach deaf people to fly. They don't use the radios, but they use their eyes. So another thing that I think is really important, I love the fact that you said listen. I think Leslie came up with that one, is also look. I mean, that's incredibly important to see who's out there, because there's a lot of people, just like Bill said, they may not have an electrical system or they may not have a radio in their airplane. So they are out there and they're all, flying in the same airspace. But I think Leslie brought up a really good point before the show, and that is there's some resources as to what we should say on the radio. And those resources, Leslie, maybe you could tell us what those are if people are online right now and they want to look.
Yeah, if you want to go back and do a deeper dive into this after you listen to this episode. So in the Airplane Flying Handbook, you have Chapter 7 that talks all about airport traffic patterns. And then Advisory Circular 90-66C is the current version of that, is non-towered airport flight operations. And that's a really good, it's a 28-page advisory circular, but there's a lot of diagrams in it. You can make your way through it pretty quick. But if you want to know, currently what the FAA's stance is on how you approach a non-towered airport and operations in and around the airport, that's a great piece of material to read, especially student pilots, private pilots. If you haven't flown for a while, or if you've just kind of been doing your own thing, go back and read that. And also in the AIM 4-1-9 is traffic advisory practices. And that's a great resource as well. And I believe even AOPA has a non-towered airport operations brochure out. It's about a 6 or 7 page document. It's really, really good too.
Absolutely. All great resources. We'll have them in the show notes here at stuckmicavcast.com. These are all great things that we're talking about, but there's so many more things. There's so many different situations. So the other thing, as far as what to say, I feel that one of the best things to do, and I know a lot of people are going to shake their heads, is that, do some chair flying with your instructor at non-towered airports. In other words, just sit there, put a radio down and listen, and then you come up with actually what you would say in that situation. So that's actually, I feel, one of the best ways to learn non-towered airports is just get out there, listen, and then sit there with your instructor or somebody who has a lot of experience flying at a non-towered airport. It really is interesting. And I know Rick Felty couldn't come on today, but that was one thing that he told me was really a struggle, is when he went from his towered airport and he was going from tower to tower, and then he wound up going to a non-towered airport. It's like, oh my gosh, now what do I say? And again, I see that a lot of times at work, because a lot of my flying I do in the middle of the night where a lot of towers are shut down. So these are all great things, and what to say is really, really important. But sometimes what not to say is just as important. Sometimes we say too much in the pattern. Sometimes we have too many conversations. So I like to keep the chatter, a little bit light, and it's nice. I know, I get it. It's nice to say, "Hey, John," or whatever. But let's remember that there's a lot of other traffic out there, and that could be, especially at the busy time of the day, it could be really, really busy. But to that point, let's talk about this as far as what not to say. And going back to my example, when I landed, I was actually flying IFR into this airport. Turns out the person that's behind me, that in the airport I was going to in New York, was actually flying IFR also. Well, one of the things you shouldn't do is become an air traffic controller, and that includes the other traffic in the pattern. So what was really interesting after I landed, while I was in the flare, the guy behind me said, "Hey, did you guys close your flight plan? Did you?" And I'm like, "Well, hang on a minute. I'm going to put on the brakes and get off the runway first. Then I'll close the flight plan. And by the way, while I'm talking to you, I'm killing time here." And the guy got mad, because I knew what he was saying, because he's on an instrument flight plan. He didn't want to cancel his beautiful beautiful VFR, and he didn't want to cancel his IFR. So finally, we get off the runway, and he was really annoyed with us that we had this conversation. Well, he started the conversation. Should I have done that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I was just like, okay, get on the other frequency. We'll cancel our flight plan. We did. We got on with, I guess, maybe New York approach or something like that, and cancel it. And then he was able to actually get a clearance for the approach, and the person was like a good 7 mile final. He finally got a clearance for that approach. So that's one of those things. Do not become an air traffic controller, but going back to like what Bill said is, if you are trying to be courteous to other people in the pattern, you can that's something you will announce. Say, "Hey guys, I'm going to extend my downwind so you guys can land." That's something you should do, and I think that's really important. So Leslie, do you have an example of what not to say, and possibly things that people think they shouldn't say that they can?
Oh, I'll get 2 examples of things that maybe you shouldn't say that I do hear all of the time. And number 1 is, any traffic in the area, please advise. And that could be, we could have a discussion or debate on that for an hour, because a lot of people do say that, but it specifically says in the AIM not to use that phraseology. And the reason behind it is, number 1, it clogs up the frequency. But if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then other aircraft are on the frequency. They're making the position reports, and it all goes back to just listening first and being situationally aware, seeing where everybody's at, how you're going to fit into the mix. And just saying that is it's redundant, because everybody should be doing that anyway. That my other one, I guess if you want to call it pet peeve, that really we shouldn't be saying is using the phrase active runway. So, clearing the active, departing the active. Use the runway numbers. And Bill made that example a few minutes ago. So, saying exactly the name of the airport, say the runway number, because you never know if somebody might be using a different runway. Just the FAA, guides us to not use those 2 phrases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say the biggest offenders, I think, sometimes are the airline guys saying, any traffic in the pattern, please advise. So that is something that we do stress specifically at the airlines, is do not use that term. So that's awesome. So James, anything that you have as far as what not to say in a non-towered airport?
What not to say? I do think unnecessary conversations in the traffic pattern are, annoying, and typically, result in a standby is for the most part, for any young pilot out there, or it's extremely distracting for someone that's learning to have unnecessary frequencies, and they're kind of like, well, what'd he say? And it's like, dude, don't even worry about that. Just being able to say, aviate, navigate, communicate. And the last one, just say standby, and then land, and then when you're both taxiing back or at the FBO, hey man, you know what? So
Absolutely.
I think I do think there are people at non-towered airports that probably give a bad name where they don't. They're not following common, the rules in the traffic pattern, and it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous.
Absolutely, it absolutely is, and you can really kind of screw up the pattern, or also make things more dangerous by actually just butting in and tying up the frequency, and that's incredibly important. So, Bill, how about you? Anything you want to add as far as things not to say at a non-towered airport?
Well, I like Leslie's point about the active. As when I flew up in New England, I remember the Unicom operator in a down east Maine airport saying, "Ain't none of them active. They all just lay there." And of course, the dreaded left final. Just never say left final. I'm sorry, that's just an automatic bust right there.
I like left final. That's kind of a neat one.
No left final. No left final. Now you guys, you're hitting on it all. It's like, keep it clear, keep it concise, right? There's enough noise going on the radio as it is. The tighter you are, be accurate with your positions. A lot of times we get very much at home with airports we operate out of, and we say our position relative to some landmark that we all know about, but the itinerant, the guy that's coming in, he doesn't know where the Apple Blossom Mall is. So it doesn't do you any good to say that. He's like, "Where's that?" Looking around for where this guy is. So, use position reports that mean something. Traffic pattern, legs, mileage, something like that people can use.
Absolutely. And then, and kind of going back to that, I was so glad you said that, because that is not a help to people. Hey, I'm over the mall, and like, well, what mall? I don't know which mall. And the other thing too is when we're announcing, sometimes we don't say enough. It's kind of interesting. If you're clear of the runway, that's also a nice thing to say. And also think about this when we're actually taxiing out. Telling people we're taxiing to runway 5, going back to that whole active is making sure you don't say, "Hey, I'm taxiing to the active runway." But that's something that I think we just have done, I think, because of our past a lot of times. It's hard to get over that. It really, really is. But anyway, so what else? Anything else we forgot? Well, no, there's a lot of stuff that we haven't talked about as far as airport operations. But really the big point there as far as things to say and things not to say, use some logic. And also use the AIM. Use the AIM and also the advisory circular. I think that's really, really important. So yeah, anything else you want to add? Say, Bill, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. Let's go back. I mean, we talked about, don't be an air traffic controller and things like that. Here's something. This is more of a safety thing than a talking thing, but it's a phrase. Line up and wait. You guys in the airlines, you hear that all the time, right? You get locked and loaded on a runway, line up and wait. That is an air traffic procedure. That is not something we should be doing on a non-towered airport. Because what are you doing? You're pulling out onto an uncontrolled, no tower, no controller. You're turning on a runway, and you're turning your back to the traffic that you can't see. So please do not line up and wait on your own accord at a non-towered field.
Yeah, I tell you, it's great advice. I don't like lining up wait in general because I can't see what's behind me.
Even with the tower, never mind.
Yeah, right? It sure is. It absolutely is. But really good stuff here. The one thing I do want to stress, though, is the fact that we're talking here. We only have about 40 minutes to talk, right? There is so much more about talking on the radio, and part of it is actually getting used to talking on the radio. I alluded to this before, but a lot of times we push that microphone and we lose it. There's like either that mic fright or our brain goes dead. Well, what we're going to try to do is actually keep that brain active, and by doing more and more practice in the pattern and doing more of the calls. So if you're a flight instructor, I really going to try to get you to get your students to actually talk on the radio as much as possible. Maybe do every other call if they're really nervous. Some people just get on there and boy, they're just absolutely amazing. So some of the things that I do, and I'd like to hear everybody else's view on this. When I have somebody that actually is having issues with the radio, is I kind of take every other call because they know they're going to get a break. And then all of a sudden, I start taking the training wheels off. So it's like they do 2 calls, I do 1. And then they do 3, I do 1. And then all of a sudden, they're doing all the calls. But what other techniques do you use for somebody? And this is interesting. We're talking about non-towered airports. To get them used to talking on the radio, Leslie, what is it that you do to get over that mic fright?
One of my students, so many students have mic fright. They're so nervous. That's the most nervous that they are is talking on the radio. There's just something about it. But yeah, going back to even lesson number one, even maybe on their discovery flight, to show them they can do this, that, the controllers or the other pilots, they are humans too. And maybe sit in the plane, maybe you just ran up and you want to request a clearance to taxi to the runway. And have a script ready. I mean, that really helped me when I moved from rural Jonesboro, Arkansas, out to Maui to a really busy Class Charlie airport. I was kind of the opposite. I did all of my training at a non-towered airport, and I freaked out every time I had to go talk to air traffic control or get flight following or anything like that. I was so nervous. So then when I was forced to start flying in this busy Class Charlie, one of the things that helped me the most is having a script laid out. And so I sat with my instructor, and we just went through and we role played, we chair flew through that script. And, of course, instructions are going to change, things are going to change, conditions change. But for the most part, VFR flying, you have the same clearances depending on which direction you're going to go. You're going to have the same altitudes. You have the same frequencies for the most part. So just going through that and going through the things and the script that you expect to have over and over and over. Then if you can do it on a simulator while you're going through the motions of flying the aircraft and then take it to the real plane, that's really helpful. But if you can get that, CFIs, get that student even on an intro flight just to make one call, but role play it, go through it a couple of times, show them how it works, and then let them do it. And even that first call, if you do it early on, is such a confidence builder.
Actually, that's a great idea, I tell you. Get them into the game right away. That's awesome, Leslie. How about you, James? What do you do to try to help people get over mic freight in non-towered and possibly towered airports?
So I really like ATC app. I'll encourage them to just open up the app and listen to different frequencies. Some of the busiest airports, or even the local one, like close by to us, the closest Class Charlie is McGee Tyson. And just listen to the clearances, listen to what the reports that people are making, and read them back. When you hear one thing, read it back. That is probably the most effective thing that I've noticed with young students, but and it helped me a ton. But also, like Leslie said, scripts, right? So I was just deployed to Qatar, and we flew into Iraq almost every day. And there are specific procedures, and I'm a seasoned pilot at this point, and there are specific things that they want me to say all the way through this mission. And here we are, and I just mess up and butcher everything, and they've got a script, and I have to go home, and I'm sitting there, and I'm a seasoned pilot, and I have to sit there and chair fly what I'm going to say when I enter this airspace. This is what they're going to say. This is what I'm going to say. And over until I get there. So, inside the States, you kind of get accustomed to almost any airspace to where we could get there. But for young students and young pilots, I mean, most of what you can control is before you even take off, and you can really sit down and kind of expect what to hear, what clearance you're going to be. You're going to the south, right? You already know you're going to go to the south. Already be expecting what they're going to clear you, or what you're going to say when you're departing to the south. And chair flight, say it over and over and over again.
Common theme here, chair flying. I think that's terrific. That's terrific. How about you, Bill? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just support what Jamie just said about the script and that a lot of times everything's really a format. I kind of move away from just an intro student to a new IFR student too. A whole lot of things are going on there when they're starting to learn IFR. And it's almost, it is like lines of a play. You pretty much know what's going to be said. So we can sit down and kind of coach. When this happens, this is what the controller is going to tell you. There's going to be pretty much a set format. So when they just go, bleh, all those words come out, you can say, wait, I kind of know what's to be expected because I know where I am. I know what they're going to do. They've got a set way they vector. So you can expect what's going to happen. So it's not so much just random words came spitting out at me. So I can kind of know what's going on. And you can predict, I don't know, maybe not everything, but probably a good 80 to 90% of what's going to happen. You can kind of plan it out.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I've had issues with landing at airports is, and sometimes we lose track of time, is the lighting at an airport. Because a lot of times we're landing at non-towered airports because the tower closed, and that's actually turning the lights on. If you don't know how to turn the lights on, do a little research. It's actually it's in table 2-1 let me look at it 2 and 2-1-1 as far as the actual ability to turn the lights on and off. But two things. Number one, let me talk about a little bit about lighting. Number one, know what lights are on the field. Look at the airport facility directory. Look at your charts and look at your IFR charts even, and then know when the airport's open. Know what time the tower's open and whether you're going to have to turn the lights on, because you're coming into this black hole and you're like, well, gosh, I can't see the airport. Well, all you needed to do is 7 clicks and the lights are on and they're pretty high. So you usually have the 3 different steps. You have the 3 different steps: the 3 clicks, 5 clicks, and 7 clicks. Low, medium, high usually. So with some of them are low, and high depending on the type of approach lights that are there. But one thing that's really important is, first of all, know how to turn those lights on. Remember I was saying when I was in that flare, I noticed out of the side of my eyesight that I saw something happening, like all the lights were going dark. And as I was, I had my landing light on. So as I was turning off, I noticed, oh my gosh, it's pretty darn dark. And I had already hit the 7 clicks. The thing that happened is, after I put the 7 clicks in, there's a little bit of a delay. And I got nervous. I thought I did it wrong, but it wasn't wrong. If you ever notice that when you're doing this at night, try it out. When you turn the lights on, sometimes it takes a second and then they come on. And that was like, when those lights came on, I was like, oh, thank God. I can actually get off the taxiway here and I can see where I am, because it was actually pretty dark out. And that was really, really cool, just to actually be able to see that come on and have that experience of, now I feel comfortable again. So that's an important thing, is just remember how to actually turn the lights on, and you can actually even turn them down to low. And that's something that I think we forget sometimes when we're flying cross countries at night at non-towered airports. So make sure you know what lights are out there, if you have VASIs, PAPIs, and that type of thing, and use them. That's really, really important. I know I talked in an episode with Max Trescott about doing circle to lands at night and things like that, and being able to actually see the airport is incredibly important. That's for sure. But as far as the lighting is concerned, Leslie, I guess one of the things I'd like to see is what do you add to what do you teach people when you're flying in a non-towered airport, either how to identify the airport or what kind of tools do you use?
Well, for identifying the airport, when you get several miles out, during the clicks to turn on the airport lights, definitely using your chart supplement, ForeFlight, AOPA's airport directory, whatever resource you have to be familiar with ahead of time, what pattern of lights. Maybe you don't know the names of what type of lighting system is set up, but you can identify the pattern of it. Because sometimes the airport lights can get a little confusing at night if it's stuck in the middle of a city and you have street lights and headlights and building lights all around it. So knowing what to look for ahead of time. But, lighting is not just for night flying, but also during VFR day flight. You want to turn on your landing light 10 miles out from the airport. That's just going to help other people see you, other aircraft identify you. I personally, especially if, I've keyed up the CTAF and I'm listening and I realize, there's like 5 planes in the area or in the traffic pattern. I want to light myself up like a Christmas tree. I'm going to turn on my position lights, even though it's not nighttime or required for daytime VFR. I want to turn on every light that I can, at least while I'm getting into the airport traffic pattern, because you may be coming in on that 45 to the downwind and somebody may be in the downwind and you've announced your position, what your intentions are. They can look over their shoulder and see that landing light or see your position lights on and be able to see and avoid you.
So we're not just turning the lights on the airport, we're turning the lights on ourselves. I think that's a great point. Awesome point, Leslie. James, how about you? What do you teach folks about lighting at airports, especially operating at night, obviously?
I'm gonna go back to the preparation. I think this lines right up in it. These are all problems that you can already chair fly and know what you're gonna do the night prior. As an Air Force pilot, we show 3 hours prior to takeoff. I know that airlines, they're stepping pretty much to the plane, but they have several thousand hours, and there's teams and teams of people that have everything prepped, ready to go, so that everything you need to know to fly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carl. I fly with aircraft commanders that have, tens of thousands of hours, and they're still going to prep the night before their flight. If you think, Mr., 50, 100, 200, 300 hour pilot, that you're just going to step to the plane and just go without even thinking about anything, you are like, that is a terrible plan. That is a terrible plan. And, and a lot of my customers are serious aircraft owners, diamond aircraft owners, higher, dollar end airplanes. And what got them to where they can afford this airplane is sometimes, the human factors of like kind of the macho man, I can do it. I don't take no for an answer. That's great. That got you to where you can afford this plane. But now you need to step back. You need to really think about, this can kill me and everyone in the plane with me. This is new. So,
Absolutely. That great advice, by the way, just to add to that, just so people know, especially at the airlines, you have to be there an hour before the flight, right, to get ready. I mean, you may have a 40-page release that you have to read through. But many times you'll see people doing just like you said, and actually sitting there with their iPads preparing even 2 hours prior. So as a professional, which we all strive to be, even in recreational flying, we want to prepare very early. So that's a great point, James. As far as the lighting is concerned, anything else you can add as far as anything else that you help your students prepare for getting out to the airport and airport lighting?
Yeah, so go into ForeFlight the night prior and look at their approach plates and look at the lighting system that they have on the airfield and be familiar on the approach plate, what lighting systems are. If you've never seen, the A with the circle or whatever, that, look it up and see what that means. And you can chair fly and know what to expect. Do they have PAPIs? Do they have VASIs? Is there 7 clicks to turn the lights on? Some airports don't have that. And you're sitting there, pop, 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 and there's a NOTAM that tells you it's out. This is all prior planning that you can, you should know this the day prior.
There's a common theme here, James, and I appreciate that, is prepare, prepare, prepare. You can never be prepared enough. So, Bill, how about you as far as lighting? Anything else you want to add to that as far as preparing people for flying at night, especially with airport lighting?
Yeah, the lighting, I was going to bring up the same. James hit that there. ForeFlight, the EFB apps, they give you a lot of good information. Little known thing, I think, that a lot of people miss in ForeFlight is you can actually put in your VFR traffic pattern. So wherever you're coming, you can load that up, give you a little path, how to enter, where you go, kind of set you up, know what to expect when you're coming into that unfamiliar airport at night. Be careful, right? We don't necessarily know exactly where the terrain might be. Cross-reference that. You may need to be on one side of the airport or another, but a few minutes with that EFB app can help you out getting in. Speaking of terrain, we've got that here. For lights, we've got a little ridge line west of this airport here. If you're coming in pretty low, sometimes you can be clicking the lights on. It may not work. You mentioned there's a little delay, or sometimes in our case, we're low, we've got some terrain in the way. The signal just doesn't get through, and they don't light up. Now you look confused. Okay, where is it and everything? You might have to be patient. Think about that sort of thing that's in the area. These radios are not super powerful to get that turned on. So,
absolutely,
something there.
Some good stuff, I tell you. A couple things before we go as far as concluding here. At a non-towered airport, especially if you've been flying out of a towered airport, we have to do a couple things afterwards. Taxi clear, let traffic know we're clear of the runway. But there's a few other things that we need to do, and I'd love to hear everybody else's ideas on how to remember to do this, is to close your flight plan or to cancel your IFR. And I tell you what, there's nothing more embarrassing than landing and forgetting to cancel your IFR. And I'll tell you an interesting story happened to me many years ago. I landed in an airliner doing some training, went and saw these other guys standing there. Oh, it's a check airman. They're taking the airplane to go do something. Oh, great. We get talking. Good to see you. What kind of food is there? Terrific. I'm going to the hotel. We walk out of the airport. They take the airplane and fly away. Well, the problem with all that is the fact that the local police showed up at the airport, and you know why? Because we didn't cancel our IFR, and they were looking for us. And of course, we get a call from the company saying, "Hey, guys, where are you? We're at the hotel. Where are you? And then jokingly, and then he said, you didn't cancel that IFR, and they started that first stage of the search and rescue, and that's sending out people to find you. So, one of the things I used after that very embarrassing moment is to say to myself after I land, hey, where's the tower? And I say that to myself, and that's just my tool, is I just say, hey, where's the tower? And if there is no tower, and it could be physically there, where's the tower? Oh, I didn't talk to them yet? Oh, wait, there's something else. Oh, I got to talk to somebody else, and that other person is air traffic control. Either call flight service, call the approach control, whatever you need to do, remote communication outlet, whatever it may be, to actually cancel that flight plan. So I'm curious as to what I use that thing, where's the tower kind of thing. And I remember that really, horrible incident there that was very embarrassing. Leslie, what do you use to try to remind yourself to close your flight plan?
To close the flight plan, that's just one of those things that I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but once you have, whether it's something happened to you on the maintenance end or you messed up on something, once you do it once, you never forget again the rest of your life. And it's not happened to me, but I have had over the past probably 4 or 5 years, I've had 3 calls from the Coast Guard because our aircraft in Hawaii, in the notes under the aircraft, when you on your ICAO form, had my name and phone number to contact in case of emergency. So over there, even for VFR flight plans, the same rule applies. Our pilots would go out, they would open up a VFR flight plan, they would get close to a non-towered airport, then they would either try to call flight service would not answer their calls, either due to bad reception because of the mountains all around, or nobody was answering. They couldn't get on with the ATC for some reason. So they get on the ground, and several of those airports have really, really bad cell service, if any at all. And so they try to call the clearance delivery phone number that you can find in the chart supplement, and they can't get cell service. 30 minutes go by, and then I get a call from Coast Guard saying, do you know where this aircraft is? And so we have to track them all down and everything. So, I've known firsthand the value, and, when they say search and rescue is dispatched, they really mean it. They come out looking for you. So hopefully that's, I tell that story to all of our student pilots and just say, it's very expensive and very embarrassing. So make sure you talk to somebody to close that flight plan before you get on the ground, or have some way, a backup plan if you're in a non-towered airport out in the boonies where there's no good cell phone service.
Absolutely. Wow. I didn't even think of that. No cell phone service. That's something else to think about. So, just go to the local payphone. Oh, wait a minute. They don't have those anymore. So 1-800-WX Brief. That's
dating
for sure.
yourself.
I know. I just did, didn't I? Absolutely did. By the way, the reason that I'll never forget to do that what I just described in that, one thing I forgot to say, that was my very first airline flight ever. It was a training flight. So that actually made such an impression that, like you said, if you do something embarrassing enough, you won't ever forget that again. So that's kind of what helped in my instance. So James, how about you? I'd like to hear what you do to try to prevent people from forgetting to close their flight plans.
Well, 2 things. Number 1, it happens to the best of us. And number 2, it's self-critiquing. So they'll let you know about it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I personally, if I'm flying in IFR, for the most part, once you get that IFR rating, you're going to file IFR for almost every flight, even if it's VFR conditions. But I try to cancel as soon as I have the field, and that's my technique as an IFR pilot. I always try, as soon as I have the field, I'm going to cancel, and so that way that just removes that. It removes that barrier, and if I have to fly it all the way down final, and I'm flying down to minimums, I am the back of my head is saying, James, don't forget to close your flight plan, because if you're flying to a non-towered airport, which is what we're talking about, they're not going to close it out. And so if you have to fly it all the way down to minimums, you're going to lose. They're typically going to change you over, and you're going to not be able to, they may have a frequency as soon as you roll out that you could still reach them, but typically it's not going to work. So then you're going to have to remember the phone number that they gave you while you're, trying to pick your way through weather, intercepting final. And so I always try to cancel early.
Absolutely. And with that said, if it is minimums like that, you don't want to cancel because you might be back in the IFR again. But I think I get your point there. That's really important to remember that if you can cancel in the air, if you have the ability, why not? If it's VFR, again with that caveat, if it's obviously it's IFR, if you're going to go around, you want to make sure you're still in the system and actually operating properly, still on an IFR flight plan. But good point, great point. Bill, how do you help people prevent themselves from forgetting to close their flight plan?
Yeah, we don't. I like what Jamie said there. I like the same thing. Be polite, cancel in the air if you can, because that frees up airspace for again, weather permitting, that sort of thing. So I usually think about it that way. Around here, we're pretty well conditioned because we're in the DC CIFRA, so we need flight plans for everything. You want to do pattern work after towers close, you got to do a flight plan. You want to hop to another airport, you got to do a flight plan. So we get pretty used to it. And then if you don't, when the 3 Black Hawk helicopters show up following you to the airport, that's a pretty good reminder. So they don't forget after that. The nice men in the black suits remind you very well when you don't close a flight plan in the CIFRA.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gosh, a lot of what we're talking about here, again, this is an introduction to non-towered airports. There is so much more. I mean, we could go on for hours and talk about very specific things. I wanted to make this an overview, and I'm kind of hoping we've actually brought up more questions possibly than answers, and really encourage people to start really researching what they should do at a non-towered airport. And I like what everybody said here. The one common theme is chair fly, get out there, prepare, get with an instructor and get some help flying in the non-towered environment, because I think that it's a challenge to many people, especially who've never flown at a non-towered airport. So I really highly recommend doing that. With that said, anything else anybody else wants to add to this before we move on to our picks of the week? So let's move on to our picks of the week, and that is in the after landing checklist. And this is actually, I'm going to start off because this one pick of the week that I chose was actually because of this scenario with the non-towered airports, is something I looked up, and it's something I teach and I give to all my students or all my learners at the airline, is this advisory circular. And I try to link them to it or send them the PDF file. And that's actually Leslie spoke about it earlier. It's Advisory Circular 90-66, and the current one is 90-66 Charlie. Non-towered airport flight operations. It's a long AC advisory circular, but it's absolutely terrific. I think the biggest thing that you can take out of there is also what not to say, and I love the fact they have those examples. But we just talked about 40 minutes about this. We can go on for hours, and this is something that you can actually really drill into specifics and challenge yourself. Try to go into there and find something new in that advisory circle and try to learn something new. I think that's really something I would challenge you to do. So that is my pick of the week, and you can find that in the show notes. It's going to be a link in the show notes, but FAA.gov, you can look at under advisory circulars and under 90-66. So, Bill, what is your pick of the week? Bill?
I hope you didn't use this one last time when I wasn't around. But my pick of the week is where I went and visited a little while ago. I hope that shows up.
Showing us the hat.
Yes, can you see it? Yeah, that's right. This is an audio podcast, isn't it? So went up to a nice non-towered field with a bunch of airplanes that don't have radios, like Piper Cubs. A couple weeks ago to the Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, Sentimental Journey fly-in, which is a yearly gathering centered around Piper Cubs, but all Piper aircraft, and really anybody can go. So I went up in Super Cub from our airport here with a friend and visited that fly-in. Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, they do that every year. That airport is under threat from local developers, as are many. Beautiful museum there, the Piper Museum, shows the whole history of Piper aircraft. Cubs were made there, a bunch of different types of aircraft throughout the years. That was the one that was almost destroyed in a flood years ago and rebuilt. No longer a factory for Piper, but a lot of history up there. Great non-towered airport to fly into, and watch out for no radio Piper Cubs flying around. But so Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, Sentimental Journey. They've got a great website showing all about that.
Yeah, that is a great spot. So thanks for that pick of the week. That's awesome. I'm glad you went up there. Leslie, what is your pick of the week?
Well, my pick of the week is very similar to Bill's. Mine is my most favorite non-towered airport in the entire world, and that's in Hana, Hawaii, on the island of Maui. And it is just so beautiful to fly there. I know a lot of our listeners go to Hawaii on vacation. If you have the chance to book a flight lesson and fly to Hana, it's just the most spectacular airport. It's a small little terminal, non-towered airport right on the coastline. It's all built up on lava rock. Once you land there, there's actually a hike you can do to one of the state parks, the famous Black Sand Beach that's at Waianapanapa State Park. It's just awesome. So I recommend booking a flight lesson with either Fly Maui. That's the flight school that I used to work with. And then also Maui Flight Academy makes flights in a Cirrus SR-22 to Hana a lot. Lawrence is a great instructor. There's some other things you can do there for the aviation enthusiast. You can do powered hang gliding or gyrocopter lessons with Maui Hang Gliding. And then also you can do skydiving as well. There's a drop zone there at the Hana airport. Blue Hawaiian does scenic tours if you just want to sit back and relax, or you can do a helicopter lesson with a Go Fly Maui LLC. They do awesome flights over to Hana. And you can also, one of my favorite things to do is to fly up to Haleakala, which is a dormant volcano. It sits at just over 10,000 feet. Overfly the crater, look down in the crater, then kind of pull the power and coast down to the Hana airport and land there and take that little hike along the coastline. So Hana, Hawaii.
And how do you say that big mountain there? Say that
Haleakala.
Haleakala. That's easy for
House
you
of
to
the
say.
Sun is what that means.
House of the Sun. Oh, wow. That's cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for that pick of the week. I'm going. Gosh, I'm going to get over there. But definitely check it out. Really cool pictures, actually. I was looking while you were pulling up, talking about it. It was beautiful, beautiful area to fly around. So thanks so much for that. James, what is your pick of the week?
My pick of the week, so I still encourage anyone that owns an aircraft, bring your airplane into the 21st century with a true electronic ignition system from ElectroAir. It offers better performance, ease of operation, less maintenance, and decreased fuel consumption. I think we've seen a lot of healing on cylinders, surprisingly enough, where it burns out the lead. All the lead and carbon deposits that get left behind with a weak and inefficient ignition system like magnetos. And we're seeing people get a lot longer life out of their cylinders, where I think that the actual savings starts to make sense financially.
Outstanding. Thanks. And you can find that at www.electroair.net. Thanks for that pick of the week. Well, gosh, I really appreciate everyone here adding some value to our listeners as far as what to do at non-towered airports. And I would actually encourage you, if you're watching here on YouTube or if you're somebody who's listening, to do something today to really try to increase your knowledge as far as non-towered airports. Maybe you're out there looking at a video, possibly listening on the radio, choosing some of those apps possibly to follow and listen and practice with your instructor. But get out there, do some flying, and make sure that you do something today to really increase your knowledge of non-towered airports. Well, I really appreciate your listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, we'll talk to you next episode. Safe flying out there.